So it's currently Sunday. Last Friday, our glorious leader, Terry Childers, held a press conference to talk about a few things. It was closed to the press only. They did do a live stream. We're going to do a little response about that. We're going to talk about some of the things that he talked about and respond to those things. And like I said, it was a live stream. That's where we got the video. It's a little pixely, so I'm pixely. It's a little pixely. Sorry about that.
I was deeply disturbed by a news article which appeared in the Amarillo Globe yesterday.
Okay, so it turns out that the conference isn't to address the actual problems or his behavior or anything like that. It's just to, he just got all the news together to criticize the news for reporting the news.
It was malicious lie from the beginning, and I'm deeply disappointed that the Globe News made the decision to run such an article when it was found at the time to be baseless.
All right, so this is the story that was run. It was a report about an incident from Oklahoma City from like the 80s. He's saying it was baseless, unfounded, and you know, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But the point is that it is relevant to what's going on because they ran a report about him berating an employee at a time where he is currently, there's actual evidence where he is currently berating an employee. So he goes on to lay out the details of the story. He said it was a personal attack on him. He said someone at the city received threatening messages and that they were going to blow up his house or something like that. And this is Terry Childers' response to the threat of violence against him and his family.
I kept police security for 24 hours. I then counseled the security detail for me and promptly called Bill Berman on the phone to deliver a clear message to him. I will not be intimidated by him and his henchmen. If he wanted to harm me, I was in my office from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Come after me.
All right, so Childers, he goes up against the this mafia-style intimidating union boss with a just a come at me, bro. I mean, we're dealing with like right now. Terry Childers, he is just a hero in his eyes, and now I guess that's what he's trying to tell us, is that he is afraid of nobody. Just come at me. He's not afraid. A lawsuit was filed about this whole thing. It was eventually thrown out, and then he continues to talk about some other things.
One only has to spend a few hours in that community to know that during my tenure as city manager, we laid a strong foundation which has allowed that city government to grow and to prosper.
Good to know he's got his ego in check.
In my view, there's something wrong when a media outlet fails to do its job in a manner to produce fair and balanced stories to truly inform a community.
All right, so with that statement, what he does is he turns the whole story and everything going on now to that the city manager, this hero who will take on anybody, is now being unfairly attacked by the media. And he just changes the whole dialogue of what's been going on over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, and keep in mind that the story that was run, nothing in there is actually false, because they're not actually claiming that he did the things. They're just reporting that the story was reported at the time. They even talk about how there were no witnesses and all, you know, that it wasn't actually proven. But which doesn't necessarily mean it didn't actually happen, but they didn't actually say that. They didn't actually say he was guilty of doing that stuff.
There's an effort underway right now to demonize me in a highly personal manner by running a totally discredited 30-year-old story. If you're going to run such a story, do you not have an obligation to examine all of the stories related to Money for Nothing series in context with the questionable story before you draw conclusions?
Well, no, not really. They don't actually have a responsibility to run the other stories that say anything else about him, because those aren't related to what's actually going on. But previous allegations of him berating employees are completely relevant to current allegations of him berating employees. He He then opens up for a little Q&A. His first part was fairly short. He opens up for a Q&A. Here's question number 1.
Thousands of people have heard the audio messages, thousands of people signing a petition for your resignation. Talk to me about, in that speech in your apology in City Hall, you said, quote, "I will do better." A lot of the citizens of Amarillo wanting you to resign. Explain, with all this happening, how will you do better?
Okay, so the petition gets mentioned, the request for his resignation is mentioned, and he's now going to give us an answer on what he's going to do to rectify the situation from here on out. Let's see what he's got.
I have the experience, the skill, and the ability, as would be indicated by the other places that I've worked, to do a credible, quality job. I made a mistake, no question about that. But to bring into the discussion a 30-year-old discredited story, it ain't right.
The story, again with the story. He dodges the question and fails to recognize what they're actually asking, but it's the story. What's he going to do? He's got to deal with this thing. That's what the press conference is about. Don't ask about what happened and what he did and what's going to happen after. Just ask about the story, or don't ask about the story, rather.
Mr. Childers, there's been a lot of questions surrounding the day of February the 14th and the events about that. Only you can answer that because you were there. Beginning when you arrived in Amarillo at the hotel, can you walk us through everything that happened?
Absolutely.
So now we get the first-person perspective of what happened that day. So we really get to fully appreciate and understand the total situation and why he reacted the way he reacted.
I fly into Amarillo. I go to the hotel. There's an issue with regard to having to have my key recharged. They don't seem to be able to get it right in terms of I'm there for an extended period of time. So I go up to my room, can't get in. I make the mistake of leaving my briefcase there, but I thought I'll just run down, get the key recharged, get back up here.
Well, that's not a good reason to yell at somebody or threaten them. I mean, a normal, rational person doesn't leave their property laying around and expect to come back and it still be there when they left it in a public place. That's just not how a normal person thinks.
When I arrived back at my room, my briefcase and my pool bag were not there. There were a group of kids marauding through the hotel, and it upset me that my personal belongings were not there where I left them.
I like the marauding kids comment, like this is Mad Max and it's a post-apocalyptic land where the wastes are ruled by the youth.
And you should know I had some fairly sensitive information inside of that briefcase, and because of the security procedures going into airports, I had my wallet in there that had money and credit cards in it. So it was even greater concern to me.
Well, that's just incompetent and negligent, isn't it? I mean, if you have sensitive information laying around, you don't just, or if you have sensitive information, you don't just leave it in your briefcase laying around for someone to pick up and walk away with. I'm glad this guy works on a lower level of government and he's not in charge of our national security or something like that. And on the wallet thing, when most people lose their wallets, they, get frustrated and call credit card companies and start canceling stuff. This guy calls 911 and tells them to send out the SWAT team. He asked some questions about finding a permanent city manager and how long he'll be there. Let's see what they have to say.
As interim, is there a set period of time that you will be here in Amarillo?
No, it's an indeterminate amount of time.
Indeterminate amount of time? Not if I can help it.
So to be clear, did you initially offer a resignation?
I told council I did not want to continue to work in Amarillo because of that nasty, racist telephone message.
What happened to our heroic city manager who will stare death in the face and take on the union bosses unwaveringly with the threat of violence? I don't know what happened with that. And why does one mean message make him want to resign from one person, but the voice of nearly 2,000 doesn't matter to him?
You brought up a term of using offensive language. Do you understand that some of the language you used in referencing a woman as Han is I don't want to say it's just as damaging because I'm
No, it's
neither
not.
black or a woman.
No.
But they do find that term offensive.
I'm not going to let you go there in terms of making that comparison.
No, I'm not making a comparison, I'm saying offensive language.
Yeah.
And there are women who are outraged at the terms that you use.
And you know.
So not only is he being condescending, but he's also kind of asserting himself as this patriarchal figure and telling this girl, hun, you don't know who you're dealing with. So he's basically saying, listen, girl, not only am I a man, but I'm also the man in charge. He also talks about his reason for talking like this. He justifies it in a way.
That's the way we talk. And if someone is offended by that, I'm sorry, I'll refrain from ever dealing with that on that basis. But
that's not an excuse. You can't just say, that's just the way I talk. If you're offended by it, I just won't talk like that. But that's, that's just the way I am. I mean, my, great-grandmother was extremely racist. But we don't dismiss that by saying, well, that's just, how she was raised and the time and the place. So that's just the way she was. It's still unacceptable. That's why things are getting better, because those old people and those old ways are just dying off. And people that aren't like that are moving in.
Mr. Babinset has come out and pretty much disputed everything you've claimed, saying that fire and police personnel were allowed in there. He's been there since 2009. He has tenure. He's gotten an award in 2012 for being outstanding. His expertise is that they don't need to be in there. They're just a phone call away. You just coming in a couple of months ago, how do you compare that?
He's asked directly, despite his lack of experience, how does he dismiss what he was told by the supervisor?
Well, first of all, I respect his opinion. I also reserve the right to say that I disagree with him.
All right, so I love how he says, I respect his opinion, but I completely dismiss it and I don't agree with it at all. I mean, how many calls has Terry Childers taken in a 911 center? Has he even been in the place? I mean, up until the day that he went in and, I'm assuming, yelled at some people and told them how terrible of a job they did? I don't know. How can he make any significant changes based on his knowledge or lack thereof?
Mr. Childers, can I ask you, going back to Tuesday, council meeting and the apology you made, and I believe you said, pretty sure you said that you spoke to the 3 dispatchers that morning. That was still more than 2 weeks after that incident. Can you explain the length of time between the incident and that?
I like his just like kind of dismissive wave of his hand. He just kind of blows it off. Yeah, he just kind of blows it off. I like the wave of his hand. I'm sure we're about to get a prompt response. Let's see what he has to say.
That we got to do.
Smug drink.
I'm going to say again, this whole phone call deal, I made a mistake. I apologize for that mistake. I'm going to do better.
So he acknowledges that he apologized, but he dodges the actual question of why it took so long for him to actually apologize. Maybe that's because people found out he was an asshole and they were actually holding him accountable for his behavior.
Before that story ran, you were given a message to call that could have explained all of this before it ran. Did you get that message? And if you did you choose not to call back?
Well, that's the question I was waiting for one of your folks to ask.
I didn't want to make it about us.
So he's asked directly if he got the message to leave a comment. He can't wait for this. He said, I was expecting this question. I'm excited to answer this. This will be the moment that interim city manager Terry Childers redeems himself and proves how terrible the media is.
I took the time to go back into Dale, Oklahoma archives to kind of get a sense of what was out there so that I wouldn't be surprised. My question legitimately is, did you guys look at any of those articles in the Dale, Oklahoma archives?
So he confirms he received the message, and he went back to look at these other stories. He asks them if they saw the other stories. I'm assuming the other stories were stories that didn't make him look like an asshole and actually made him look like a good guy. I'm not really sure.
And so my question is, if you find this type of story, and if you do the work of being a fair and balanced reporting outfit, and you see some of those same articles that I saw and recall by looking at that archives, would there have even been a need for a telephone call? Okay, thank you very much.
So he asks him a question, he ends the conference right there. He doesn't actually give him a chance to respond, but the answer is yes, they still need to make the call. The other stories aren't relevant, so that has nothing to do with the actual story that they reported on. They called him for a comment. He confirms that he did get the message, otherwise he wouldn't have been looking at the other stories. He just flat out refused to do it. They effectively did their job and they tried to let him defend himself, but he chose not to. That's no reason to say that they are being unfair or they're trying to crucify him or they're going after him in some way. So the news did everything that they needed to do to provide the balanced and fair coverage that he's claiming that they didn't provide. That's our response to the press conference from Terry Childers that he held. There was so much information in this thing that we'll probably be making multiple videos about it and multiple responses to different things he said. As far as I know, it's still available on multiple news websites, so you can check the whole thing out for yourself. For the latest updates on the current affairs going on in Amarillo, make sure you like our page, Amarillo for Amarillo. Look for it in the description links below.